Thanks for being here. As JP is saying, I think this is a good idea that we do this for a couple of years now. Obviously, and this is the disclaimer, I do this also as me being me. This is not something we discussed a lot in the board. Of course, we had discussions about this, but the disclaimer, this is my personal take on it. So, 25, what's the beginning of 25? What's the state of the industry? First of all, to me, 25 is the new 24 in that sense that for quite a while we have been saying survive till 25. Now it's ultimately survive till 26 to a degree, and how I call it, and stay cool while at it. So in the end, unfortunately, I don't think the situation massively changed for the better. And yeah, 35, maybe even better. I'm with you, Jefferson, on that. But let's start. And especially in times of crisis, what's important? The money side of it. How do we finance our game? How does that look like? And in my point of view, the classic publisher funding is still very tough. And to be honest, it feels to a degree even tougher than before. Some of the biggest players in the industry, Tencent, closed studios, closed their label, lots of restructuring. And this is just one example. We are also aware of Ubisoft having all kinds of structural challenges on the shareholder side, and the list could go on. On the other hand, there's all kinds of publishers who either closed down, still kind of the aftermath of parts of it, of Embracer, of a couple of those companies who got listed on the stock markets, which, of course, the last 2, 3 years had a much harder time to be successful in the eyes of their main stakeholders, aka the shareholders. So there's still lots of restructuring and changes. But I see, and as you all know, I run a family of studios of over 15 studios. We have been doing slightly more deals than especially compared with 23. So that's the classic publisher funding. And it all wouldn't be so bad if what happened many years ago, that investment through VCs and PEs and whatnot, even the stock market, kind of started pushing into this. If you look at the numbers, not only did the investment in studios go down, but if you compare it then also with inflation, rise of costs, it's even worse than most people think. And when they look at it at first glance. So investment, alternative investments, financial investments are not filling the gap. It's rather getting even more difficult. And I have firsthand knowledge and insights because I work with a PE fund for a while now. We look at all kinds of opportunities, and it feels the hurdles for investors to step in are rather going up than down. So this idea last year, maybe there's going to be a start of a new FOMO, right? People see the market turning. People are discussing interest rates through the Fed. There was a lot of emphasis and hope basically put into this. And at the moment, I don't see it happening. Then the next one, subsidies. Subsidies have been something which especially EGDF in Europe has been fighting about a lot of you in your respective countries are working on this. And I don't see much movement here, right? Talking about my own country, Germany, we had a hold on subsidy. It kind of started again this year, still a bit unclear how it's really meant. I'm not supposed to share my screen because I didn't make a presentation. I'm just it will be way too long, and I have a couple of things I will share afterwards anyway, because there have been great colleagues out there. To name one, Matthew Ball did a 224 presentation, which I think is pretty good. So just doing me doing the same thing but different, I thought it's not worth the effort. But coming back to the subsidies, I think also in Europe with stuff like media and so on, let's see what happens, right? We also know from the kind of lobby perspective that VGE has a little bit of a different perspective on what should be done with those kind of support programs, not just say media is a subsidy, but it's kind of similar but different. I don't think that's also filling the gaps. And talking about the market itself, sales per games are down, right? If you look at all the numbers, even if you have a good game, what either you call it like double I or A or something like this. So I'm talking about a certain threshold of quality, especially on Steam. The average sales per game are going down. Sure, there's a couple of examples, who's not addicted to a game like Balatro, right? This is so, yes, there are examples of individual games doing extremely well. So that's great, and congratulations to those people. But on average, even established game developers, publishers experiences lower per average sales. And I don't see that this is getting better anytime soon. And what's also a bit weird, I just read a couple of days ago, also the average reviews on games on something like Steam's are not the number of reviews are going down, but the overall sentiment goes down, which is kind of interesting to see why players actually review games worse than they have been doing it in average. Obviously, this is big numbers, averages, statistic, and so on. So there can always be individual cases, but it's also looking like this idea of we have these core gamers and they're buying these kinds of games, and this kind of gamer buys this kind of games. There is more and more question marks and people even challenging if that was ever really true. If we shouldn't just dive much deeper into analytics about who your audience is and become even more niche and more specific. And that obviously also means that the overall games market is not really growing at the moment, right? There's a couple of countries who are doing better than others, and we talked about this in EGDF meetings too, and all that. That's all great, but the overall market, if you take in inflation and all this, is at best stagnant. So let's see when we are getting back to kind of pre-COVID growth levels. But we go back to COVID growth levels, I think, nobody dreams or delusionals about that at all. Coming to my next point, uncertainty. And that's something I've been talking about the last couple of years. You're all aware that not only EGDF, but me as a person are very much aware of what's going on, or at least we seem to be aware and diving into these topics in regards to geopolitics and all this. Trump's inauguration was just a couple of days ago. There's already the first executive orders. That's all not necessarily helping, especially us in Europe. There's glooming tariffs. Not that I heard that they want to put tariffs on games, but maybe there is stuff there happening, right? What's happening with social media, kind of a deregulation in regards to hate speech, disinformation, all that kind of stuff. I think you all follow the news on this. This is not making it better. We still have wars going on, and this is also something which I think is important. It feels to me we have a growing disruption in Europe too, which the rise of the right, a couple of elections, take the Romanian one, let's call it highly unusual, right? Having a presidential election, which they have to then basically call back and all this. This is stuff which has been unprecedented for decades here in Europe. All of that uncertainty, that certain chaos is not helping the business climate. It's not helping basically people if they talk about their kind of deployable money and disposable income into games. What other challenges are there? Then we have this kind of old games problem, right? If you look at Steam, the games which are played the most are oftentimes games which are 5, 6, 7 years in the market, right? And those games still have a growing user base, still have good sales and all this, which again is great for those developers and publishers, but for new games and new projects, it's not awesome, right? People sticking to this to a degree way too long for the market to stay healthy. The other thing is live service games. We had last year a couple of those even big profile ones like Concord from Sony being canceled weeks after they've been released, right? One of the reasons is how many of those free-to-play live games should a player play? You can't, if you are a serious, committed player, you can't and won't play 5 shooters free to play at the same time. This is not happening. So there is an overabundance, especially on the live game side. Then, of course, still discoverability plus the user growth is a problem. I already mentioned inflation, cost is rising, and all that kind of stuff. The marketing funnels, not only on mobile, we discuss now, a lot of people discuss an exodus from meta platforms after the changes and all that. That all makes it even more difficult for publishers and developers to market their new games. And let's see where this goes. But I just, for example, joined something like Blue Sky 2 months ago. Let's see if they really make it, right? It's definitely getting more and more fragmented, and so forth, more effort, more difficult to market the games. Then I think this is also talking about us, the people, and our people in the studios. There, I see a certain exhaustion, right? The trouble. This is, of course, a lot of people, even if they're still doing okay, laid some people off and so on. That creates fear, anger, and this kind of burnout potential for people, which is, of course, just another word for ultimately a depression. So I see exhaustion in teams of people. This is, let's say, half of the people who quit in our studios named stability, fear of or a kind of uncertainty of the future of one of the main reasons leaving us, right? They try to go into academic jobs, stuff where they still feel there is this other form of stability. Then, a couple of those new kids on the block, this is a couple of years ago when we talked about subscription gaming, doing even more user-generated stuff or even AR, VR, for some of us, Web3 games. None of it really moved the needle for us as an industry that much. Again, for individual players, yes, there's people on Roblox making good money, but even Roblox is not making money, right? So let's see how sustainable and how much this is growing and becomes a real place of serious professional, to a degree, reliable business. I have certain doubts that this is going to work out, right? And on top of that, there is more and more developer studios forming up in all kinds of emerging developing countries all around the world, which again, from a player perspective, is awesome. There's more kind of opportunity to find something new, people trying to disrupt, coming from different cultural backgrounds. From a cultural perspective, awesome, right? This is to a degree underprivileged regions making games now can express themselves artistically is great. For the market and the industry, I have to say, and looking at it in Europe, it's not great because it's cheaper, it's different, and so on. So this creates new challenges where we have to deal with. So one of the opportunities here is, always, of course, how can a European publisher or developer work with players from these regions to basically band together to create, kind of a mixed cost perspective and all that kind of stuff. Then, rising cost. I talked about inflation already. At the same time, still some of our people, of course, and rightfully so, want to have a better kind of personal situation, want to get a raise, la la la. So the cost, to a degree, in some cases, is still going up. Also, when you think about the bigger projects, they're still growing. I have to also say that some of those kind of news that games cost a couple of $100 million. In some cases, I'm not so sure if that's really true or if that's really part of the marketing, to be very blunt. But I think we can all agree that overall, especially at the certain quality threshold, cost goes up. Another thing, right? Quite some of our people were very much like on the fence with AI, but a lot of us were thinking AI could actually be part of the solution, right? Making things faster, quicker, and so on. And I think today we have to say that didn't happen, right? AI is helping, it's speeding up a couple of things, but it's not disrupting like how some people thought it would, right? That it's going to be super easy. I know there's tons of startups, and there's been poured money even into AI meets gaming and development a lot in the last 24 months, especially. So let's see what's around the corner. But I think it's fair to say that at the moment it didn't change our daily reality as developers yet. Then there is a growing part of, from the culture perspective, of games being used for messaging, right? This is it's still, there's more and more games coming out. Give you an example. There's a military shooter coming out of China now. I played it a lot. It's a pretty good game. But, of course, they tell their stories, how they depict stuff in a different way. It's their right to do it, but that is also a challenge, I think, for us in Europe from a cultural perspective to see this kind of effect, what it has on society, the players, what kind of narratives, and so on. That's not an immediate problem necessarily for a developer, but for us as an association, for you guys running associations, working with politicians and all this, yes, there's more question marks of what that means if we go forward. And then, interesting enough, because of tools, because of being fast, smaller games, and so on, I think on average the size of a development studio goes down. How many people work in a studio, right? There's more and more smaller studios. That's not necessarily bad, but it's definitely something which is happening right now. So all this doom and gloom, what are the opportunities? One obvious one, and I'm happy to say, is something like Switch 2, right? Nintendo just announced finally that Switch 2 is happening this year. Switch 1 is the most successful console of the last generation. There is not many reasons to not think that Switch 2 is going to be a big success. So yes, there's opportunities with of course, much stronger hardware in the Switch 2 to even take some, games which couldn't be ported on Switch 1, so you could port it there. There's going to be new people. There's going to be tons of marketing from Nintendo. There's going to be excitement around that. So Switch 2 is an opportunity. Then something which some of you are not liking or see very ambiguous is crypto, right? Since Trump won the election, all the crypto coins more or less went up again a lot, right? So yes, there is probably a rise again of Web3 games. What I can say is don't be naive and just jump in, right? It's still a field where I advise extreme cautions, who to work with, what to do, how to tackle. But it's very likely that this year there's going to be some stuff happening in that area too in regards to games. Then what I keep always saying since decades, PC is not that, it's not that, it's not that. PC is still one of the few platforms actually still growing. And there's no reason to assume that this is not continuing this year. As an open platform, I think it really, especially the last years, is showing its strength. If I go back even further, right, EA with Origins took off a lot of the games on Steam. They went back. Ubisoft, same thing, and so on. So there's a likeliness that the classic walled gardens, even the console marketplaces, are opening up to not only crossplay, but bringing games to Steam even more. And wouldn't it be something, and it's not something I have any indication that that's true, but let's assume, Xbox at one point in time allows the Steam store, right, on their console. I think this is stuff which is not completely insane anymore to believe that it might happen. So ultimately, PC as the base platform, extending with something like Steam Deck, maybe going on other consoles and so on, is something where PC gets even stronger. China, India are still market opportunities, right? I mentioned the reviews from gamers. Unfortunately, China and Japan seem to statistically being the countries where you get the lowest reviews, but there's still a big market. And those people in these countries are now not, kind of newbie novelty gamers anymore. They have been growing up with games, first, of course, on mobile, free to play, that what they're playing now, indie games and, premium games for a while now. And I really value also their, enthusiasm about those types of games. So there is still tons of opportunity there. But having said that, please be very cautious. It's not easy. One of our teams just went through it, so shitstorms and whatnot. Some of them, in my opinion, were a little bit interesting to witness, right? To say it mildly. But ultimately, I think there is great potential, and do not diminish those communities, right? There's tons of people, as I said, who kind of know what they're doing, and we would consider like educated gamers being interested in core experiences. And I think from the opportunities besides this, that's unfortunately basically it, right? To kind of summarize in high level, money, still a problem. Uncertainty adds on top of the problems, tons of challenges, and a few of opportunities. So the likeliness that end of 25, the games industry overall will say, wow, that was a great year, unfortunately, is nearly zero. Yes, there will be winners. Yes, there will be countries doing better than others because they are faster with regulation, subsidy programs, other forms of support, or having association doing the right trade missions and all that kind of stuff. So I think one element also which is important for 25, we have to have our shit together. We have to be detail orientated. We should not dismiss even smaller things like a trade mission, right? It can change companies' reality if they also, if they prepare well, if they get the right introductions, do the right deals. So it's really about attention to detail. This is not the time for grand abstract visions or talking about what's happening in 3, 4, 5 years. It's still about the daily hustle and grind for the companies, and of course for you guys, the associations supporting them. That's basically how I personally see 2025. I hope a lot of it kind of makes sense to you, and I'm looking forward to discuss now. Thank you very much.